because I didn't know if I was going to pay for the next semester. I didn't know where the money was coming from. I didn't know how long I had there. So I always was looking like I got to excel because these guys got it easy, my roommates and my friends. Like I could be kicked out of here anytime. And if I get kicked out of here, I got to be able to step into the world and be able to produce. Otherwise, I have to go back and do this thing that I don't really want to do, which was live home. I was always I became number one at what I did because of the fear of failing. I became the number one stockbroker, because I had no choice. I had to work harder, learn harder, to like act more, like fail forward more. And so that just set the tone for my career. So I was slowly living this fast life that was kind of taking me further and further away from Dane. And eventually I got fired from the job. And it was just a disaster, man. And my whole life came crashing down. I'd spent my whole life from 15 to 25 trying to get ahead of everyone else, and I was, and then I watched it all burn in front of me. So I had no options. And I was this strong character, like moral character, integrity, always did the right thing. And now all of a sudden this little blue pill has like completely
control you.
Yeah. And that was just like, that was very hard for me. I committed my life to going to church because that was the only thing I had literally nothing else to spend my money. I was like, I don't have any money, so I had heard Jesus and getting saved, and I was like, I was gonna go to this church, and it spoke to me. And then 90 days later, I met the woman of my dreams who became my wife, and then she started the business with me. And that was just like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be the best at it. Bodybuilding became a passion for me. It wasn't essentially, but it was the lifestyle of bodybuilding. If you go to a gym, 99% of the people look the same, today as they will in 3 years. I was changing. And so a lot of people became super curious. They're like, dude, you're changing. What are you doing? What are you doing? So I would give people tips, because I was always studying and then applying that, and trying to get better. Man, maybe God is putting this next thing on my heart, and I wanted to do something for men that were like me.
Dane, as I was telling you before we got started, this is going to be a pretty simple conversation. Not only because we're both meatheads, although you may be more recently than I am. I don't know. We'll see if you had a little meathead in you before you jumped into your current journey. But I want to start back a while ago, and I don't know what a while ago looks like until we
Yeah,
actually dig into this. I've piecemealed your career journey together.
yeah.
So I want to go over how you made some of these leaps and kind of your big obstacles, mental obstacles, external obstacles that you kind of went through as you were going through some of these changes. So from what I can tell, you started in maybe corporate sales, corporate job to some degree, and then eventually you made the change to start your own uh, headhunting company. DAP Consulting, I think, was your
Yeah,
first one before you started the next one.
that's right.
Um, Tell me what that transition looked like, because moving from from a, what I would assume, a good paying, comfortable paying corporate job to your starting your own consulting company, starting your own business is a big jump. I mean, to drop
Yeah.
one good salary to go start something that you can question, you can assume that it's going to do well, but I don't know, maybe you had some things lined up, maybe you had some good connections, maybe you had other things that were kind of, you felt like were in your favor, but what prompted you to kind of start to make that jump?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I was in sales, so financial instruments with UBS, and then I eventually landed my last corporate job as an employee was with paychecks. So I was selling qualified retirement plans to the business owners or the businesses that were using paychecks, the payroll provider. So they were using paychecks to process their payroll, and I was going in there selling financial instruments to the business owners. And I was doing that in South Florida, which was great, man. I covered all of east of 95 from like Aventura all the way down to Miami. And it was just an amazing job. I was 25 to like 30, and I controlled my entire day. I'd run 3 appointments in the afternoon, and I became the rookie of the year, and I became one of the top reps in the company. So year after year, I was a circle of excellence player, and I was making a couple hundred grand a year, which was great. And I loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the system that I was in. I loved the schedule that I was able to run. But at some point in time, I started to get bored. It became monotonous for me and easy. I was able to kind of do 5, 6 appointments a week and kind of still excel. And then the other time I was investing heavily in learning golf. And so I became a really good golf player. And I remember this guy said to me one time, I had shot like a 78, and the guy said, hey, Dan, you know what they say with people that shoot over an 80? And I said, no, what's that? And he said, they generally got no business playing golf. And so I looked at my scorecard and I said, well, dude, I shot a 78, like a wise ass. And he goes, and generally people that shoot under an 80 got no business.
Mm.
And I thought, well, shit, man, he's
Oh, stuck you.
yeah, I was like,
That's
damn,
good.
man, that hit hard, And then I
Yeah.
realized I wasn't engaged as much anymore. Every job that I had had, Jerry, I had always dove deep into the process of whether it was learning how to become better at sales, how to specialize in the cold calling aspect, how to get better at face-to-face presentations, how to master financial instruments and simplify the complex issue of that world. I always was into this. I had this self-development itch of going and kind of learning things and becoming great at it. I never did well when I was lukewarm. I always found that vices came in or distractions came in when I got bored. And so I was at that stage where I was bored. And so in South Florida, unfortunately, I got in a car accident on the job. And I told a lot of people the story, but I got in a car accident on the job and they prescribed me pain pills. And so I got addicted to these Oxycontin pain pills. And couple that with a couple $100,000 of cash, plus a schedule that was pretty autonomous, and some pills and some alcohol, it was a fuel for disaster. So I was slowly living this fast life that was kind of taking me further and further away from Dane. And eventually I got fired from the job because I went in stoned from these pills and a long night out. And it was just a disaster, man. And my whole life came crashing down. I'd spent my whole life from 15 to 25 trying to get ahead of everyone else. And I was. And then I watched it all burn in front of me. So I had no options. I wasn't able to go to competitors because there was no reference that was available for me. And this was family, right? Like they would have said good things about me at Paychecks, but I just didn't feel right going back and asking for a positive reference because I didn't have a positive note. So I was forced to start a business. And so that came to me because a lot of people were calling me recruiters and they were kind of square peg round hole. It was like, hey, I got this job, give me your resume, I'll send you on an interview. And I was like, well, bro, let me tell you more about like my background. And instead of like trying to get me a med device, like let me tell you. And it was like nobody thought that critically as a recruiter. So that gave me the idea I can do this better. I can go to the people that were like me and I can help them identify that next level career, one that's going to give them a higher salary, put them in a higher ticket product. And so that led me into the discovery of headhunting and recruiting. And so I ventured to start that. And honestly, here's how it started. I had wasted all my money from this addiction. I'd finally stopped the addiction. I had very little money. And the guy had called me as a recruiter to place me, and he lent me $5,000 to start my own firm. And that
Wow.
allowed me to recruit on his jobs. So I
Wow.
had committed myself to God and going to church because I was such a fucking disaster. Uh, I had said, hey, I'm going to stop the partying, stop the drugs, stop the drinking. The only thing I'm going to do is go to church and commit to going to church every Sunday. And I started to do that. And slowly every week, I kept away from the drugs. I kept away from the vices. I kept away from the going out. And I started having these messages speak to me. And I started getting more and more back in identifying me, but also building me back into a better version. And lo and behold, this man threw me a bone, like literally gave me a $5,000 check. And that's how I started the business.
Hmm.
And he was my first client. I served him. And that grew from $5,000 placements to essentially we grew into $100,000 per placement by the time I grew the business. And so, every year it went from 5,000 to 8,000 to 12,000, 15,000 to 25,000. And we just kept getting better, but it always required me to level up in skill and talent and time and commitment. But it was this process of development.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't easy. As I like to say, God gave me enough rope not to hang myself, but I kept propelling forward. I kept leaning into it. And yeah, so
Wow.
that took me 7 years to my first agency to build a 7-figure business. So it wasn't easy. And then we rebranded and niched down and only did it high level headhunting for product managers. And that was Palomino Partners. And it took me 3 years to scale that to a 7-figure business.
Mm. Pretty incredible. That is quite a journey, most definitely. Um, let me go back to the process oriented mindset that you have.
Yeah.
How do you think you developed that? Is that something that you found yourself having early on, like high school, middle school? You just liked the process of things. You liked being able to know the outcome, not know the outcome, but be able to build this process in so that you can get to a particular outcome. How do you think you started to build mastery around that? Because it seems like you built your life around basically that ability.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Nobody's ever asked that. And as you're asking, I'm thinking about it. Like one of the first memories I could have where I really went deep into something was baseball. I remember we grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which was kind of lower income, and my parents made the stretch to move us into a higher income area. But we were always the family that really didn't have enough money, but they were trying to give us a better life. And I remember transitioning and having to play baseball in high school. And it was with all these kids that had been playing together forever, and I had never played with them, so I had no idea, and I knew I didn't want to show up and be embarrassed, so I invested in a tee that I bought for $20. In the whole winter I put that tee in my basement, and I hit hundreds of baseballs off this tee. And I remember that led me to become the number one hitter. I batted like 787 my freshman year. It was
Wow.
unstoppable. And then the same thing sophomore year. And I remember thinking, wow, I just committed and did something other people weren't willing to do. And I became really good at it. And then people kind of lifted me up. And then school, I didn't really take that seriously. But when I found something that I loved, I remember going, I got to go deep into this, right? If I want to excel and I don't want to be laughed at or embarrassed, I got to go deep. Now, a lot of that comes from my parents did not go deep in anything. Everything they did, I did the opposite of. Other than their heart, their empathy, their love, their compassion, all of those I took. But when it came to like life and excelling and
Work, yeah.
learning, it
Mm.
was like, okay, this is what I don't want to do. Um, and so when it came time to go to college, like they weren't there for me. They weren't pushing me to go to college, but I knew like I'm going to be the laughing stock. It made me feel like freshman year again. Like these guys are all going to go off to college, and I'm going to be stuck in this town doing what? Like my parents don't give a shit if I'm like pumping gas or making $1 billion. Like they just didn't care. So it made me go into this place of like nobody gives a shit about you unless you give a shit about you. Excuse my language. So I had to figure out how am I going to go to college. And then when I got to college, it was like, how am I going to pay for college? How am I going to go get books? How am I going to go to classes? So it was always, and I remember books were the one thing that I was able to lean into. I bought a book and it was by Bill Gates, and I read the book. And then I bought a second book, like Liar's Poker, and it was relatable. And it was like these books were teaching me things. And it was like as long as I applied them and I was getting better at things. And that became like this connection in my brain, which is like, okay, I don't have the best mentors and I don't have people that I can count on in real life, but I can count on this information, and this information could make me better. And so when I was at college, like that's when it really kicked in, because I didn't know if I was going to pay for the next semester. I didn't know where the money was coming from. I didn't know how long I had there. So I always was looking like I got to excel because these guys got it easy, my roommates and my friends. Like I could be kicked out of here anytime. And if I get kicked out of here, I got to be able to step into the world and be able to produce. Otherwise, I have to go back and do this thing that I don't really want to do, which was live home. So it just kind of forced me. I'm like, God always saves his toughest lessons for his greatest students. And I believe that. Like I was always forced to survive. And so books and development were it. And then that led me to like my first job becoming a stockbroker. And I remember these guys were making $400,000 a month. And dude, I just remember that my one coach said, take the cotton out of your ear, stuff it in your mouth, and just listen. Don't think, just listen. And dude, I was a sponge, and
Hmm.
I became the number one stockbroker. Because I had no choice. I had to work harder, learn harder, to like act more, like fail forward more. And so that just set the tone for my career. And every job I went to, like I went to UBS, they were just like I was always I became number one at what I did because of the fear of failing.
That's pretty incredible. So there's one thing I've noticed with, well, there's a number of things that I've noticed, but one thing in particular that I've noticed with many successful people, and by successful, I don't mean like they were just able to get lucky and do it once, but generally they were able to do it and then do it again and then do it again. And they can kind of like follow a sequence and they can continue to achieve the thing they want to achieve.
Yeah.
is that the earlier they took responsibility for their life or for their progress in life, it seemed like a lot of them took their life in their hands early, and whether
Yeah.
that was by chance, whether that was forced on them. Many people who had like broken homes, it's not unusual for that kind of person to find themselves in a successful endeavor as an adult, because as a teenager they were forced essentially to take control of their life. It doesn't sound like you had a broken home. Sound like you had parents who loved you, who had a lot of compassion for you, but they just didn't push you. There was no drive there.
Yeah.
There was no, hey, go make the best for yourself. It was just more apathy, maybe, than anything else, or indifference or something to that effect. So
Yeah.
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, dude.
The other thing is the want to not be, well, you said the fear of failure, which I think is one way to put it. The want to not be last, or the want to not be left behind, or the want to not be behind everybody else, however else you might want to think about it,
Yeah.
is another important driver there, because I think a lot of people can take that idea and kind of use it to feel bad about themselves, right?
Yep.
I go in, I'm in the situation where I'm behind, and oh, I'm behind, and you kind of get this, whatever, you just feel
Woe is
bad.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Woe is me kind of mentality. And I think that's more people than not. But then when you hear somebody like your story who took the same exact situation, the same exact scenario, and they were able to recognize that all they needed to do was build skills and abilities to be able to achieve the things that these other people were achieving,
Yeah.
and then go and grab it. So that's pretty amazing that you were able to kind of build those things and come up with those things early.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was honest. My parents didn't have money, so I knew like there was no phone call I could make that was going to get me
Yeah.
out of these situations. So I had to have massive belief in myself. Like that was kind of the force. And I had to have a chip on my shoulder to some degree. It was like, okay, okay, you're gonna leave me out to dry. I'm gonna make it happen. And because I remember I'd call my parents and be like, hey, I need money. Like I have no money. I'm like literally going through the couch in my dorm, like looking for change to get a dollar meal off the dollar menu, like every day. And I'm like, like, oh yeah, we sent you money. And bro, I go to this mailbox every day for like 3 weeks
Yeah.
and no check ever showed
No
up.
money.
And I realized they never sent the fucking money.
Yeah.
They like, why couldn't they just say that they didn't send the money versus this hopeless feeling every day? And that like it hurt me for so long. But there was this lady that I went to speak to, like after I found that I ended up, because I didn't touch a drug or drink or anything. I was 25. I was super clean and focused. But once I got a little bit of comfort and I dropped those standards and had some success, and my friends moved down and they started adopting their habits, I fell off, right? And so I ended up talking to this lady. But when I fell off, I went into that mentality that I never had, which was, why they didn't do this for me, and then this, and it was this woe is me victim mentality, and that fueled this drug phase of mine, right?
Mm.
And the lady said, do you realize if they didn't give you that upbringing, you wouldn't be the person you are today. Like all the things that you're great at and that are your differentiator. And that was like, yeah, all right. So I needed that reframe to be
Mm.
like, all right, like I'm gonna drop this anger, I'm gonna drop this finger pointing, and I'm gonna take control and responsibility of my life. And so I've always had these stages, but it was always like nobody's gonna fix you, bro. Like,
Mm.
nobody's coming to save you. And whether that was, fitting it, and then later in life it became, my discomfort in my body. But yeah, that tool and that trait of having to go out and fix that problem for myself and go get the information needed, and then believing that if I had the right information, I can solve the problem. A lot of guys I noticed, man, they don't believe in themselves because they've been saying the same shit to themselves and never taking action. But I always took action once I recognized the problem.
Yeah, it's very clear. The quicker that you can go from idea to doing,
Yeah,
the better off you're going to be. So many people are just scared of the outcome. They're scared of the what might happen, but you don't really know. Not you don't really know. You have no clue what's going to happen until you actually do it.
that's it.
Even in a basic industry like fitness and exercise. I had a
Yeah,
fitness studio for 10 years. My average, I kind of told you this in the message that I sent you, but our demographic was between 45 and 60. That was our average demographic. So that's like prime demographic for excuse making. That's
Yes.
that demographic right there, right?
Yeah.
So as you well know, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
I have a level of compassion for that person because they've also been told a lot of lies about who they are and their age and how their
It's
age
too
plays
late.
a part, and yeah, so on and so forth. All the things that society and big pharma and food and even the government have told them about how they can change or can't change. So there's a
That's right.
level of compassion there, right? At the
Yeah.
same time, something as basic as just exercising regularly or eating better or things like that, like people screw up so much because they're just not willing to take responsibility for it and actually step into that discomfort a little bit just to be able to make a level of change. But
Yeah.
um, most definitely. Before we jump to that, I want to jump back to, if you don't mind, the
Yeah.
little period of time where you said you were addicted to drugs once you got into that car wreck and everything, and then you started to come off of that. Um, how did you figure out that it was time to get your act back together? Because you went from straight and narrow to not narrow, to crooked and and upside down maybe, and
Yeah.
started to go back to straight and narrow. And it's very easy to keep going to down that crooked upside down, especially getting fired, man. That's tough. Especially
Yeah.
getting fired. It's easy to just keep going down, right, circling down that rabbit hole. It's super easy.
It is.
But somewhere along the line, you decided not to do that. So was that an instantaneous thing? Was it like you had a moment, or was it like a progressive thing where, days you'd wake up and you're like, I feel like I need to do something different. What did that look like?
Yeah, man. I'll try not to get emotional because that was like such a hard time in my life.
Sure.
There was a bunch of different levels of hitting the bottom. I hit a bottom and I try to get back up, and then I pick it back up and I go to another bottom. And this all happened over like 6 to 12 months. Like when you get those things, like took control of your life within 30 days, where
I'm
you're
sure.
physically addicted to them. Just a 30-day script, and then you stop them and like, you feel ill, and you're just like, whoa, what is going on? And you want to change that feeling. And so
And it's
I
incredible
was
that
started.
that's a normal thing. Like
Yeah, that's a
them
normal thing.
prescribing pills to people.
Super
It's
potent pills.
it's
Yeah,
super
these were
crazy.
30 milligram Oxycontins, and they were extremely popular in South Florida. As a party drug, is also like they were being overprescribed, and you could buy them on the street once you couldn't get them at the doctor. So it was very easy to then get them. So I had money, so I was spending 500 bucks for I don't know how many pills, $5, $10 a pill. And so I was just, okay, I don't want to ever feel this feeling of not having these, because I didn't like the feeling. But slowly, dude, I watched my life get out of control. I was drinking more. Then I started, incorporating other drugs with those drugs, missing work, like just literally being the complete opposite of the person that I was. Smoking cigarettes, like I'd never smoked cigarettes before. All this, like that I picked up, and like I was just like, didn't notice it. And I had a relationship that was very toxic, and I had blown up at my parents a couple of times, and they knew something was up with me, and then my employees started to know, my employer started to know, and it was just pretty obvious. And so I had a bunch of just little incidents, but I think there was one moment where I drank too much, and I felt like shit, and I was just like, yeah, I got a problem, I gotta go get this fixed. And that was like, that was hard because I had to, I had to call my mom and like admit it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like, damn, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was really, really tough. Because I had the emotional part is having to admit it. Like, I have a problem, and I was this strong character, like moral character, integrity, always did the right thing. And now all of a sudden, this little blue pill has like
Took
completely
control of you.
crippled me.
Mm.
Yeah. And that was just like, that was very hard for me.
Hmm.
And so I had to go get help. I had to go and like detox from this shit, and then live without it. And then I lost the relationship because there was too many reminders. And then I lost my home. And then I lost my car.
Mm.
So like all these little things, just it was clear as day. Like, you've lost control. Like this life is no longer available to you anymore. And so that I think was when it was like nothing else was available to me. The money wasn't there to keep buying these things, and you couldn't find them anymore. I lost the home, I lost the relationship, I lost the car. It was like, all right, like there isn't another option here. Like
Mm.
you gotta get your shit together. I had to move back home. And so I had to wipe the slate clean, and that's when it was like, first thing I did was, I forget all this stuff, but now it's like coming back up. My mom lent me $20 and I went and bought a book. And
Mm.
it was like, I'm gonna read a book. And I read, I forget the name of it, but it was Tony Dungy's book.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Some self-improvement book.
Yeah, was it after his son committed suicide or something
Yeah,
like that? It was right
it was
around
like
that
his
time?
first bestseller, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that, like, I didn't watch TV. I was in this like dark place, but I was like, I'm gonna go back to the book, and I read the book. And I ended up staying there for 3 or 4 or 5 months. I read this book and I got a waitering job and I started going to the gym again. And I was just reading and started doing the same thing. All right, we're gonna create another version. We're gonna create a better, stronger version. And I did. And then I was like, all right, I gotta go back to Florida. I'm gonna go back and start over. Um, and that was scary, but I did, and it was like just fucking piece by piece, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna get a recruiter job, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna start this business, and I got the $5,000, and I found a roommate, and I found 3 roommates, so I had this little bitty rent, and then I got a computer, and then I was figuring out how to do recruiting. And it was like I said, like God gave me enough rope not to hang myself. But every day I put the vices down. I started going to the gym. I started reading again. I started eating off a meal plan, like little daily habits that it was like, all that shit doesn't matter. I'm winning the day, and I was stacking little micro victories. And
Mm.
then I built, a big agency. It took 10 fucking years, but I built the most successful agency in headhunting for technology companies for what we did. Uh, but it started that way.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's almost like, because you said that as you were in the sales business, it kind of got monotonous and you were getting a little bored and you were just like, man, just kind of like going through the motions, but still making
Yeah.
good money in the process. And it's almost like, excuse me, it's almost like the drugs kind of gave you actually also another like, it's just something exciting also to do, or it like mixes up your life a little bit. And so a little bit of chaos never hurt anything.
That's
Because
right.
you were bored, that chaos kind of took away the boredom, and you know for a
It
period of
filled that
time,
hole.
yeah,
Yeah.
filled the
Because I
hole.
wasn't learning and developing and chasing a goal, it was filling that hole. So like I was going to be the best partier. Like I'm closing this mother down,
Yeah,
we're going to be the last ones going home, we're going to
yeah,
finish with all these drugs. Like I was never like, all right, leave that. I'm gonna, all you guys got, I was always the last one there, with the other derelicts. And that was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the best at it. So
mm,
unfortunately, that came at a huge cost, but it gave me this reset and it gave me this mission. And I committed my life to going to church because that was the only thing I had literally nothing else to spend my money. I was like, I don't have any money, so I had heard Jesus and getting, and I was like, I was going to go to church, and he spoke to me. And then 90 days later, I met the woman of my dreams who became my wife. And then she started the business with me. Like within 30 days of me starting the firm, I got saved, and then I met my wife, who's now my wife now. So it was like God gave me enough each step of the way, and was like, all right, like when I got saved, like literally I met my wife the next day, and
mm.
I knew this was going to be the woman. And I remember thinking like, he didn't even trust me. One day, like from the save day, like
Oh yeah.
he purposely put this woman right here, like he didn't even
Then
trust, he
somebody
knew
else
that I
to
couldn't be
hold your hand.
trusted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but she gave me that purpose of like, okay, like I don't want her to know about this old version. So I don't want her to see any of those old habits. I want her to know like I got a new chance here. I got a new brand that I can build. And eventually I ended up telling her, it was like, whoa,
Sure,
what?
sure. Hmm.
Like, where did all your money go? Like, how you all these plaques and all these people know you? And like, what happened here? And it was like, how much time you got? Uh,
No
so yeah,
doubt.
tough.
Yeah, super incredible. Another thing I believe is that human beings are biologically made for progress, and I think that's why a lot of people don't. They just kind of go through life, and it's kind of fuzzy, and they've got a level of anxiety and a level of indifference and a level of unhappiness, and it's just kind of blah because most people just have a job and they're happy to just get paid. They
That's right.
think they're happy to just get paid to be at that job, but they don't really have a purpose or anything that they're driving toward, anything. They're not trying to get any better physically. They're not trying to get any better mentally. They're not trying to get any better spiritually. They're just kind of
Yeah,
like going through the motions, and they don't understand why they have this level of meh, like blah in their life.
that's
But
right.
human beings literally evolved needing to do something to stay alive, like needing to move through life to stay alive. Our
Yeah.
ancestors needed to hunt and
Hunt.
gather and go and find shelter and, make sure to keep their eyes open. They need to move from place to place. And that was something that they had to do in order to stay alive. But
Yeah.
since we have such a comfortable life today, we have no external reason to go do that. Like we're all going to be fine the way we are. We'll all live, we'll all survive, everything will be fine. So unless you have that like internal motivation and that internal drive, that internal something desire to actually go do something worth doing or something that, is going to make you better, or something that's going to improve your life, there's life is so comfortable. It's
It's
easy
easy
to
to
get
fall into
caught up.
that
Oh
trap.
yeah, it's easy to get caught up in it, right?
Totally, man. I always say like that you should be, and these were the awarenesses. As I tell this story, you see a common theme. The moment I stopped working on myself was the moment things got dangerous for me because I was extremely gifted and talented in a couple of different areas. And the moment I allowed myself to leverage that talent or that gift that I was given and just coast and kind of be at the top without having to work as hard as everybody else, the moment things started going down this way and I was smacked in the face every time. And it made me realize that I always need to be working harder on myself harder than any job, any relationship, any business, because that is the number one priority. When you continue that development on self, all these other things tend to fall into line. But the moment you stop working on self, and I used nutrition and fitness as pieces and tools of the puzzle to work on self, right? Because they kept me engaged. They allowed me to go deep and stay within these guardrails every day. So it was like, I never go over those guardrails again because I have these daily non-negotiables that I recognize like these are the things that make me win every day and keep me aligned. And those, oh, by the way, keep me developing as a person and making me better. And that's what essentially makes sure that I never get bored again and that I never fall into a routine. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's why I didn't like the fasting or the CrossFit or these things because it was like I knew eventually it would be fleeting. And I had enough experience to be like, once that flees, I'm going to look and start gaining the weight back, eating poorly, falling into vices again. Where I was like, if I go into bodybuilding, because bodybuilding became a passion for me, it wasn't an essentially, but it was the lifestyle of bodybuilding because I knew it was a lifestyle and that it was always evolving. I was never going to be complacent. I was always going to be trying to get better, and I can go super deep into that. And that's where I try to encourage people to find a passion that has something to do with developing self. Because when you do that, then you make sure that when you develop yourself, then your higher self is always looking for evolution. It's always looking to evolve. It's always looking for expansion. That's when new opportunities come, new businesses, new relationships, new financial benefits. Like because you're now opening yourself up for expansion. But when you just settle, like I became the number one headhunter, right? And it was like I thought I'd be doing that forever. But that last when I was 41, that realization that I no longer was happy in my body made me go on this whole journey of personal development where I used training and nutrition as a tool to get there, right? But then that opened me up for expansion, which allowed me to now start this business and serve hundreds of men to a true purpose and a true passion. Like I loved growing businesses, but nothing is better than growing a man that's then going to grow his family and his children. Like it impacts and connects so much more deeply for me. But that would have never, ever been an option for me if I didn't start the journey on myself. You know what I mean? And I didn't put all that work into myself. So that's why I always tell people like, The moment you become super comfortable in your career and you justify your success based on money and how you provide and protect your family is the moment you start opening yourself up to vices and lust and pornography and just that downward slope that you don't really realize is happening, like the boiling frog. But one day you're like, how the fuck did this get, how did this happen?
That's so
You
good.
know?
Yeah, for sure. Most definitely. So let's talk
Yeah,
about that transformation because if there's something, again, having owned the business for the studio for 10 years, the number of people that had even a good transformation in the 10 years that I owned the studio, the number of people I can count on maybe two hands, maybe a little more than that. So I know how challenging that is, especially to do that in a 3-year time. Now, the problem is most people look at 3 years and they're like, 3 years, I got to do something for 3 years. And that's why most people fail because they want to do
always.
that in 3 months.
That's
But
right.
3 months ain't shit. Like it's
No,
literally not even the tipping point of what you need to do if you want to create something lasting and actually create something sustainable that is going to build you into something down the road.
that's right.
So 3 years in my mind is a short period of time to be able to make the transformation that you made. So first of all, congratulations on that. That is absolutely incredible. And I know how tough that is
Thank you
for,
so much, man. I
yes,
appreciate
most
that. It means a
definitely.
lot.
I know how tough that is. So that was your early 40s that you started to do that, which I think a lot of people start to get that. I feel like I should start making changes right around their early 40s,
For
maybe
sure.
mid 40s.
Yep.
For some people, that drags into or toward their 50s. So what prompted you to get started sooner than later? Again, was this an instant, hey, you went to buckle your pants one day and you're like, screw this, I don't want to be like this anymore? Or was it
Yeah.
like just a progression into, I need to do
Progression.
something different? What did that look like?
Yeah, there was a moment that made me realize it, but it was a progression. So I had a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old. My wife and I had been married. So we had been married 3 years. So we had our first child the first year we got married. And so we fell right into that, right? And nobody teaches you like how to be a great husband, how to be a great father, how to be a great business owner, how to be a great partner, like all these things that I was now playing a new role for. Now I played baseball all growing up. I played a little bit in college was always active. Me and my wife always trained together. So we did some form of physical activity, not together, but we always had an hour where we each did something. So whether mine was calisthenics or going to group theory, Orange Theory Fitness, or doing something, we always moved. But when we got thrown in this life, we slowly started to reward ourselves at night with a glass of wine and a big meal. Right. And then that turned into like adding a piece of cake and some sugar. And my wife had this routine where she was like, "Hey, I got the kids, you get the business," you know? So I had the benefit of not changing diapers, waking up in the middle of the night, losing sleep, you know, like when people talk to me like, "Oh," and so I'm like, I don't think I lost like an hour of sleep all throughout my child's being born. Like my wife's amazing. The
Hmm.
downside of that was I had a lot of alone time at night. So I'd come home from business, right? We'd be working together and I'd come home and she'd go put the kids to bed and she wouldn't come out and she'd fall asleep. And so I started having IPA beers and I started smoking weed again. And it was just like I started boredom, right? I was bored.
Yep.
So I wasn't working on self. We're parents now. We're in a relationship. We're married. So I fell back into this fucking trap. And so that started to then break out into then me getting mad at my wife for not looking for intimate moments with me or not looking to have moments where her and I had one-on-one time. It was all about the kids. And then that just slowly started to develop. And maybe there's something wrong with me, but no, maybe it's something wrong with her. So I started to have all these little micro fights with her. And then we go out in public. And then if there's another guy that was halfway good looking would show up in the room, I'd be like, is she looking at that dude? Why is she not looking at me? And all these insecurities that I'd never had, all of a sudden now were coming into like the most important relationship in my life. And I couldn't figure it out because I thought it was her, right? I was just like, she's not coming on to me and she's not desiring me. And we're only having sex once a week. And she's putting all her energy into kids. And then she puts them to bed and she doesn't have an interest in coming out and spending the evening with me. And now I'm stuck just running this self-talk, right? And then she comes out and I'm like,
Hmm.
like a dragon, you know, like, what's wrong with you? You know,
Yeah.
you never have sex with me.
Yeah.
You know, like just terrible.
Hmm.
So, but all justifying this behavior because it was her fault, right? Like she's superwoman. Um, and so I started doing fasting, and I started doing Orange Theory outside of work, like trying to occupy myself. And then I would drink to like connect with her. And I would tell her, like, I need you to come outside the room. Like, we need to have this time. But it was always kind of broken because I would start drinking and I would get angry again and I would pick a fight. So I would ruin the times that we did have these one-on-one moments. I would ruin them because I was drinking, and then these emotions, or I like to call them lemons, right? Or bricks that I had. I'd start throwing every brick that I had throughout the week or throughout the month. And it was just really shitty. And it wasn't a great environment for her. And then my kids were young and they're hearing mom and dad always fighting because dad's yelling again about some shit that he's upset about. Now, this was the pattern that had been happening. Okay. Now, I've fast forward, I'm doing this Orange Theory fitness. I'm fasting 16 hours a day. And then I'm doing Orange Theory at the end of the day. And then I'm coming home and eating whatever I want because I burned 600, 700, 800 calories. And I justified it. I was drinking and then I have some sugar and repeating this cycle. So anyway, one day the young guys are like, "Hey, we're going to do a transformation contest." I'm like, "Perfect. I'm within striking distance. This will make me feel good. I'll do this. 8 weeks." So I sign up the sheet, and a couple classes later, I finished the class, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go upstairs and do the before pictures." And I'm like, "You're going to take the before pictures? Like, I don't just send them in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't just email them, or
I can't do this at I can't do this
yeah,
at
my
home.
house, like in the right lighting and all this stuff,
Yeah.
And these dudes are all, 24, they're graduated, they're
Mm.
all like physical. And I'm like, damn. So they made me go up there and I'm taking the layers of clothes off because I would wear like 5 fucking layers of clothes. And I remember them showing me the picture and I was just angry. And I realized this is why I'm angry. This is why I'm taking this out on my wife. I'm not desiring my wife because I don't feel desirable. I don't feel confident. I'm insecure. I don't believe in myself. And I look like an eggplant. No wonder, right? Like this was the reason. And I played all the, like, literally it was like this rewind of all the fights. And it was like the center, the core of the onion is you're an insecure little child. And you, again, your wife isn't going to be able to fix that. Like, and I remembered, here it is. I gotta fix Dane again. Right. Another thing I gotta fix. And so I was so angry. I didn't even show my wife the picture. I didn't enter the goddamn competition. I was like, screw this competition. Fuck you guys. I've been
Fuck
coming
you
here
guys.
six
I'm not
fucking
doing
months.
this anymore.
Yeah, this band
This
says
is
I'm
your
getting
fault. I
better.
look
I'm
like
looking
this,
more
damn
and
it.
more.
Get it?
Yeah. I was like, dude, I'm done with this damn group there. You're taking $200 a month. You're ripping me off.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I was pissed because I'm like fasting all the time. How did my body get like this? And then I'm mad at my wife, like, why didn't you tell me I look like this? So anyway, I just had this awareness, bro, where I said, I am not going to yell at her one more time. I am not, anytime I feel that, I'm going to know that that is me dealing with me. And the solution was, I'm going to go find the right training and I'm going to find the right nutrition that's going to help me change this body. Right. And I'm not going to tell my wife about it. I'm not going to boast about it. I'm just going to pick myself up every single day. I'm going to start by getting up before them because at that time I was waking up with them or after them. And I was always this cranky old man. And I'm going to get my ass to a gym 7 days a week to work out this negative self-talk, to change my attitude so I can receive them. And I know the body I want to be in. And I literally said, it's going to take me 3 years. I know it's going to take me 3 years because I knew the muscle that I wanted. I knew who I wanted to look like. At the time, it was Steve Cook. If you know Steve Cook, the
Yep.
influencer,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that dude's going to look. He was doing macro-based meal planning. He was doing hypertrophy style training. And I started watching his videos and I was like, he's getting up early. I'm getting up early. He's eating like this. I'm eating like this. And I knew I'm not going to worry about the scale. I'm not going to worry about what I see in the mirror. I'm just going to put my head down and do this work. And my wife just observed, like she started seeing I was eating differently and I was pulling back on some things. And it over 90 days, I lost like 15, 18 pounds or something, and I didn't look like I look now, but I felt like I feel now. Like I was like, all right, yeah, I said I was going to do something and I did it. And I actually got a physical change and people are recognizing like, you got to change. So that was the catalyst that kind of set me on this thing was, again, it was so much pain, that I was having in my own life that I had to confront. And it was very difficult because then I had to reveal these insecurities to my wife that, like, hey, this is me, it's not you. And so yeah,
Yeah,
that was it.
for
Yeah.
sure. Well, you certainly have a level of awareness that I don't think many people have. I think that's partly from having to take responsibility for yourself early and having to build yourself into something early in your life. But, you had to do the same thing when you were going through, getting over the drugs at a different level for sure, but
Yeah.
it was the same process, same sort of idea. But that's
And I believed in
incredible.
myself. I knew like she's gonna see me work like she's never seen me work. And I'm not gonna look for pats on the back. I'm not gonna look for her validation. That's not her job. I started to kind of reassociate like this, like my kids are 1 and 3, and I knew if 3 years, if I don't change something and get to where I need to be in 3 years, this doesn't scale well for them, you
Mhm.
know, and they're gonna have they're gonna have just an environment that's not the one that I want them to grow up in. And so that was a lot of like macro patience, but micro urgency. Like every day you go and get after it, but it's going to take time. So don't beat yourself up every day. Like I'll have guys in my program, we'll go from 22% down to like 11.5% in 90 days. And they're like, oh, I feel like I'm plateauing. I'm like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
think you're going to get to my level in like 3 months? Like,
Yeah.
no, you're going to get the habits, but
Shoo.
it
Yeah.
takes time.
Oh, for sure it does. It's just hard to appreciate partly again, you have to go at people like that. Well, in coaching in general, you have to have a level of compassion.
Yeah.
Um, you can't have too much compassion, but you also, I don't think you can have zero. You could have zero, but I think a lot of people would just, shrug you off and go on to the next person. So
That's
you have
right.
to have a level of compassion. Again, society has told us that you can change yourself in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. The average person at the gym would give up on their journey. Not that they would give up exercising per se, because it was a personal training facility. So they were there and they were held accountable to that effect.
Yeah.
But as far as like them trying outside of the gym without constant focus and nudging from us, about 6 to 8 weeks it would take, not very long. Like after that,
Yep.
they'd kind of stop. 12 weeks, maybe if they're lucky, but then there were the few that would go beyond the 12 weeks and actually, make a big change in their life, actually transform, actually create something sustainable, actually create healthy habits in their life, actually understand the importance of doing the things regularly and not just
The
trying
things
to
that
reach a number.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's so important. I teach like because of my experience, I always tell people you need to focus on here's the master plan. It doesn't change. You need to master the plan. And
Mm.
every day those are habits and you just need to make sure you execute on your habits and you need to trust that every day regardless of what happens in the world, you're controlling the controllable and your body will respond. It will be a byproduct of your habits. And that was how I looked at it. It was like, I know if I just do these things and say no to these things and do these 5 daily things, my body will change. And it may take 3 months, it may take 3 years, but it doesn't matter because I'm showing up for me every day with these habits. And then there are moments like a year and a half later or 2 years later, where it was like you got the comment like, "Whoa," and it was like, oh, all right, like, like
Mhm.
shit, other people see something, and you're like, you kind of come up for air, and you're like, all right, maybe I do see something here, it's starting to
Mhm.
happen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide? So at that point, you were still running Palorino Partners, right?
Yeah. Yep.
At what point did you decide? And maybe you're still, I don't know, I don't know what this part looks like.
Yeah.
Maybe you're still doing it now. At what point do you decide to start coaching as well, or did you start to transition to coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I started teaching my wife the skills because we started to scale, the business went from like zero inbound leads to like 30 leads a month. And these were high ticket. The minimum ticket was 50,000. So
Whew.
that'd be 50,000 or like 110,000 per placement. And
Mhm.
so I mastered the whole onboarding process and I would do the recruiting and then eventually taught my wife the recruiting. And so I was able to onboard and close the deal and then she would do the recruiting. And so we did that, and we were in flow. And so I was healthier, I was happier, I was confident. So we had this really great balance with the work and the personal life. And we had worked through all these insecurities because I had become more of a secure man. So I really loved that time where I'd go to the gym. And obviously, if you go to a gym, 99% of the people look the same, today as they will in 3 years. I was changing. And so a lot of people became super curious. Are like, dude, you're changing. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I would give people tips, because I was always studying and then applying that, and trying to get better. And when I would help people, I remember like the impact that it would make when they would see me in public and be like, dude, remember you told me that? Or the way people started to respond to me in public, like, dude, what do you do? Like, and it was like, the way that they would look at me or speak to me with my kids, and they'd be like, what did that guy just say to you about your bicep? Like shit like that. So I knew like, man, maybe God is putting this next thing on my heart, and I wanted to do something for men that were like me. I was like, it wasn't a way, it was like, I wanted to help me because I was so grateful for catching it when I caught it. I was like, if I didn't do this, man, my poor kids and my poor wife, like it'd be another one of these. Oh, he started and then right off the cliff again he went, and it was like, this is not happening here. And so I knew that there were other men that felt like I did. And so the more I helped people, the more I became super passionate. I was like, all right, so everyone knows me as Dane, the PM, product management headhunter. That's what I was known for. Like we #1 on Google, #1 on LinkedIn for that. I'm like, now I'm going to tell them I'm this, maybe I'll open up a gym. I was going to open up, it was going to call it NYDB, not your dad bod fitness gym. It was going to be only men. But then with the whole thing, it was like, well, if they shut it down, like I'm out $400,000, and like it's another one of these risks that I didn't want to take. So I sat on it for a while. And then one of my close guys who's really successful, he's a client of mine in headhunting. He said, "Oh, you want to be a coach?" And I said, like, yeah, I want to be a coach. I don't want to be a personal trainer. I don't want to run a gym. I want to coach, man. And I associated with that. And I sat on it and prayed on it for a couple of months. And then finally my wife said, like, hey, I got the business. You go do it. She was like, just onboard the clients and I got this. And I was like, all right, and I was like, started doing research. And last July, I launched on Instagram. And I literally said, you need to go to your mother's, take the kids for 2 weeks. I need to learn how to spell Instagram. I need to download the app. I need to figure out how to like get the difference between
What
a
is
post
social
and a
media?
reel.
How do I use it?
I literally had no idea. I had no Instagram. The only platform I had was LinkedIn, and there was not a picture of me other than an old LinkedIn photo. Which LinkedIn, you put your best, leanest face shot on there,
Yeah.
and then you get people on the phone. You're like, you look nothing like the
Wait
fucking
a
photo,
second.
bro.
Photo's 10 years old, brother.
Literally, I've had guys, I'm like, well, you're like 70. That photo is
Yeah.
like you in college. Like
Yeah.
you're totally lying to people.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's funny.
so anyway, my wife left and I downloaded the app, Instagram, and I created Dad Bod Sculptors as the DBA name. I came up with the name and then I posted my first video and then I started learning this app and I started posting like my gym videos. Now, prior to that, bro, I hadn't taken any videos of myself. I never brought one in the gym. I didn't take selfies. I didn't do any of that stuff. And it was so uncomfortable. And again, I had so much fear, but I'm a praying man. I'm a man of faith. And I tapped into that, like, lean into this discomfort. This discomfort is going to grow you. And if you want this, I remember like one at night, I was bitching and moaning that I had to do it, and I heard this saying, it was like, the mission is bigger than the man. The mission is bigger than the man. And that was what I was like, stop being a baby. Like you could help so many men with this mission that you're going to get in the way of sharing that. And then I just kind of, and my wife came back and I had like 10 videos up. I had like a couple of thousand followers, and I was like, and then I was on the phone just cranking it out, and building. I didn't even build a product. I was like getting the messaging right, getting the avatar right, like really zoning in on how do I deliver value every day where people are going to, watch it and learn. And it was around training, it was around nutrition, and it was about habits. And then after 6 months, I decided, all right, I'm gonna actually build the product and deliver a world-class product of exactly what I needed when I was that person. All the things that I had to do alone, I'm gonna collapse into 12 weeks, right? For guys. And all the things that I wish I had somebody in my corner for, or a phone call away, or a message to say, hey, should I do this or that? Somebody was available and somebody took a vested interest. I'm like, I'm going to create the person I needed and I'm going to make that an offering to the world. And that was like, boom, that's it, go. And then all that fear of recording, and it would never became an issue again.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I got super comfortable with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally understand that. Taking it, well, especially at mid 40s, all of a sudden you're sitting there recording yourself in the gym.
Yeah.
I know the feeling, how
Yeah. And
awkward it can
guys our
be.
age, they're like, well, dude, what are you doing? This stupid ass over here with the camera. Like, who does he think
Yeah.
he is? You know?
Yeah, look at this
It's
guy.
like, yeah. So now
Really
like
full
I'm
of
like,
himself over here.
yeah, like you were a fat ass 2 years ago. He's gonna be a fat ass again. Watch, like all talking shit about me. So I
Yeah.
ended up going to a different gym.
Oh, there you go.
Then I went to another gym where I could do
Change.
this recording, so I didn't feel like people were judging me,
Yeah.
and that was I got comfortable with it until I got comfortable enough.
Yeah.
You
Well, here's
know?
the brilliant part about that. Because you did that when you changed your drug habit as well. You got out of the environment.
Yeah.
And you did the same thing at this. You got out of the environment. You moved the environment until you created a new habit, and then you went back to the original environment. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of people don't understand about habits is habits are environment dependent. If you're in an
Yes.
environment and you're having trouble changing your habits, there's a good chance because you're in the environment. What do you do whenever you get home? You get home, you sit down on the couch. After about an hour, you get bored, you get up, you go to the cabinet, you grab a bag of potato chips, you sit back down on the couch. That's the
Yep.
environment. That's what you're in. That's what you're used to doing. It's literally cues you to do that same cycle over and over again.
Oh,
And people don't understand that shit. They
I
think
know.
that I just have a hard time. I'm just addicted to potato chips. No, just don't buy the fucking potato chips or
That's right.
change something different. Like instead of sitting on the couch at night, go sit in the reading room or go sit in your office and read a book at night or go have a conversation with your wife or
Yeah.
go I don't do something go for a walk at night. Just
Yes.
change what you're doing and it'll change the habit itself. So
Yes,
like
sir.
literally you did that for those two things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I remember reading the book, The Power of Habit, and it was like habits don't go away; you have to be replaced. So it was like, oh, I'm going to replace this for that. I'm going to replace this for that. The drinking for this. The staying up late to going to bed early. It's like, okay, so I just started habit swapping, and versus like, okay, the habit's gone. I'm just sitting there. I'm just sitting there. It's like, no, you got to swap the habit. You got to get a healthier habit. And so I went through that process of reading the book and okay, and I recognized 5 really unhealthy habits that I had in my life. And I started swapping those habits. And that applied also to the gym. It was like, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable here. It was like, well, just go to a new environment. You're creating a new identity. The guy that was created in this gym isn't going to be the guy that's going to create the next over the next 3 years. So go to the gym that's going to create the next version of you. And so I went to this big 10,000 square foot gym where all these other influencers were, and there were cameras everywhere. And it was like, all right, this is my new home.
Mhm.
It's normal here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to make it feel normal.
Yeah.
And so and just like people that are drinking, like when they get around, like you can't keep hanging around going to the bar, even though you stop drinking, like you're eventually going to make a U-turn, bro. Like it's just going to happen when you're around people that have a certain habit and somebody's making a U-turn. And I've learned that enough times where you've got to go with the people that are going in your same direction and support that. And when you do that, you make your own life easier, you know? And that's
100%.
that's the power of habits. It's like it allows you to change your identity and associate, or you're allowed to change your identity by associating yourself with new habits of the person you want to become. And that literally you start changing those habits, you start changing your identity.
Mm. That's so good, brother. Dane, man, I think we could sit here and talk for about another 3 hours.
For
So
sure, man. You got great questions.
well, I appreciate that. Most
Yeah.
definitely. You got great answers. Well,
Thanks.
you've lived through a lot of life. So luckily for all of us and everybody that you've helped, you've come out on the other end helping other men as well, which is super incredible. And I know super inspiring for myself and everybody listening. But if somebody wants to find you, where's the easiest place for them to find you?
The best place is just going to be the name dadbodsculptors.com. I've got a landing page and that'll take you to all my social medias. So it'll take you to my Instagram, my YouTube, my LinkedIn. So I just set up this page so people can go there and they can learn about my story. They can see how I did it, see the people I help. They can see all my content and consume it. And if you ever want to reach out, there's ability to either book a call through the calendar or just message me. I handle all my own messages on the platforms. So that's usually the best way. And I always tell people, if you heard me on here, just DM me podcast, and then I'll ask you which podcast, and we'll sync up.
Simple enough. I'll make sure to put all that in the description as well so it can be easily accessible. Dane, appreciate you so much, brother. Good. You do just love what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Man, I really appreciate you being just a great host. Like you got a lot of information on me that I haven't shared in a long time. So I appreciate you the way you handle that and being prepared. So thank you for having me.
You got it, brother. Next
Awesome,
time.
John. All right.
Appreciate you.
Cheers, brother.